Okay, students, I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of a painting demo for you, just in case you're a little trepidatious about using your supplies. So I'll show you what I'm going to do, and I'll probably maybe speed run through some of this. This is totally optional. If you want to just go for it on your own, that's fine, but if you want to kind of see a little bit, I'll try not to make this too long, but painting takes a while. So first of all, I have my palette knife. I have three kind of larger brushes here. I mean, I guess they're medium sized, but since this is such a small canvas, these are pretty good. I've always been taught the best way is to try to use the largest brushes you can get away with, and I feel like these ought to do me a lot for this painting. I'm working flat only so that you guys can see what I'm doing. I preliminary put down a little bit of a drawing, and as you can see, because the stain is a little flimsy, I was able to kind of erase into it too, and I was able to pull out some lights. So just to give myself a sort of an underpainting, an idea of what this is going to end up, where the lights and darks are supposed to go. And I can, I'm going to push those obviously a lot more after that. So I have I'll put a little black down. Probably don't need that much black. White, of course. Ooh, okay, good. Use a lot of white. If you're using oil paint, some people like to use gloves. It's totally up to you. I'm probably putting out more paint than I need, but I could save it. I'm not sure if I'll work on this a second day or not. Kind of see how it's going to go. For oil painters, you're going to use your painting medium. I'm using Galkid. So I should test this beforehand. There we go. And I'm going to put this into a medium cup, just something that will hold it. And I don't know, I guess I put about, I'd say about maybe a tablespoon in there. A little bit more. There you go, about a tablespoon. I have my brush cleaner over here to the side, so when I need that, I forgot to grab paper towels. That's going to be an issue later, but we'll see. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. I have one little one here, and some cold wax medium. This is also what you're going to be using for when we do the impasto technique. It's going to add a lot of body and sort of floof up your paints, essentially. But another nice thing that it does is it can make this medium a little more matte. So if you just add a tiny bit, it doesn't take much. I'm just taking a little tiny bit off onto my palette knife, and I'm going to add some to the mix. I don't want to add too much because cold wax medium actually really slows down the drying time quite a bit. So for this one, I just want to add a little bit just to make it more matte. And I could stir that up with my knife. Or you could use a brush if you want. Don't be afraid of these mediums. Don't be afraid of the process. I mean, one thing I like to joke about is painting is a lot like just making mud pies. You kind of just experiment with it until you get results that work. I know that probably doesn't sound very educational, but truthfully, there's a lot of truth to that. Don't be afraid of your supplies. Just make them do what you want them to do. And if they don't do what you want them to do, go back at it a different way until it does. I'll pick up a little of this medium on my brush. Okay, and I'll just kind of work it into some of the paint. Kind of load my brush up with both the medium and some paint. I'm not mixing any grays yet. I'm going to wait till later to do that. I'm going to see how much I can get done with just the light and the dark. Maybe pick up a little more medium, kind of mix that in there. You want to just do that until you get a consistency that seems like it'll work for you. All right, so one of the first things I'm going to do probably is try to define some of the light areas. The beauty of painting is you can build it up in layers. I like to make my paintbrush strokes to kind of go in different directions. Some people like to hide their strokes, but to me it's more expressive to have them go all over the place, and I don't know. It sort of tells the story of how light's bouncing all over. Now, one downside, and I'll tell you this, is if you use a lot of charcoal in your preliminary drawing, white charcoal doesn't seem to be as bad. It gets absorbed into the paint pretty easily without affecting it. But the black charcoal can kind of incorporate itself into the pigment of the paint and slightly alter the color. So be aware of that. If you don't like a lot of drawing lines in your painting, if you want those to totally disappear, be aware of that and try to either erase them out as much as you can, wipe that charcoal away, and get it out of there. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and grab this, put a little medium in my brush, pick up a heavy gloop of this white paint, because now I want to get some good coverage. Now I'm going to take my other brush, the one that's clean, and I'm going to go ahead and start doing a little bit of the black. Now there's not really any places on here. I'll show you an image of the cup here again, that are really solid black. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to thin it out quite a bit, so it acts more like a stain. Just by darkening some of these areas, so a lot of the cup's going to appear to be lighter. Remember the rule of relative value. If you darken one thing, it makes the things around it appear lighter in comparison. I'm going to try to get my brush strokes out of there, go in different directions. There's something about these translucent layers that are really cool, because when you have sort of a translucent layer of paint, a paint where the light can go through the pigment and bounce off the back, it adds a layer of depth. It's almost like stained glass or something. That's one thing that's really neat about adding sort of mediums to your paint that create that layer of depth. So right now, again, I'm just trying to make a stain, or sorry, like a wash. I already did the stain. And moving that pigment around, and it stays wet so I can keep moving it in different directions, and effectively sort of making some areas darker or lighter. So. Now this brush had a lot of white in it, so I'm going to try to push out that white onto me and squeeze as much out of it as I can. and then clean it just a little bit because I want to use this brush for the black. Normally you don't necessarily want to take your brushes and mix them too much with different colors. But then again, you'd sit there and have to have like 100 brushes if you needed a new brush for every color. So sometimes you have to just kind of pull some of the paint out, get it clean enough that that white doesn't muck up my blacks. So I'm going to test here on my palette, kind of make sure I get the right translucency that I want. Then I'm just going to nibble in a little bit more right in here, behind the table. That should be right there. I can make a correction to that later. I'll paint white over the top. Nice thing about painting is, I mean, it's, you know, just like a drawing. You want to get the drawing as close as you can in the beginning to being right. But as you work it and you see mistakes or you see like errors maybe in your sort of thinking as far as like how the preliminary drawing, how the preliminary drawing was, you can go ahead and kind of correct that. All right, so already just by darkening that background quite a bit, you can see how much it brings that cup forward. Now I'm going to take some of this dark and sort of selectively use it at the base of this cup. There's a really strong shadow right where the cup touches the table. It looks like there's a little bit of a heavier part right in the middle there. It's kind of heavy over here. Not too heavy though, because remember, shadows are usually lighter than you think they're going to be. So I put a little bit down, and I'm going to squish out a lot of the paint. I'm going to try to get just medium, and wash it around, scumble it, and try to get a transparent layer for shadow. And just keep manipulating that sort of goo until okay, so now this is starting to come out. So far I've only really used two things. I've used white paint and I've used black paint and just some mediums. And just like when you do with drawing, try not to mix the two, by the way, because they'll bleed into one another. But that's okay, because if they do, you can kind of fix that. Be aware of how your brush strokes are working, just like if you were drawing. People that have had drawing from me before, you know, you want to be conscientious of the fact that the brush strokes don't seem to respond to the shape, the two-dimensional shape on the drawing, and they seem to go out in different directions. It adds to the three-dimensional illusion. Either that or you just make them disappear completely. It's kind of up to you how you want to approach that. And I'm going to work just a tiny bit more extra dark right down here. Just work that in a little bit deeper. All right, so far, what I've done, I mean, here we have some of the stain still visible. I might add a little bit more black up here. This is looking a little too thin for me. Let's make it darker, more black. That should just kind of mix right in. This paint's probably not dry yet because it's oil. God, the annoying thing of working working on these little canvas pads as they slide all over the place. And I don't really have a way to hold it down. You guys work on your big, nice canvases and have them upright on an easel of some sort, you're going to have a lot less problem with that. You know what? That's too dark. So check this out. There's something called tonking. And what you can do is if you get, say, a little too much paint in an area, there's a nice trick. I kind of get sucked into art world, just as I imagine you will. Anyways, tonking. Tonking is referred to as when you put like a paper towel down, or a rag, probably safer even, and put it over the mass of extra paint, and then you just pull it up. So it just kind of pulls a bit of that extra paint off that maybe you didn't want to put there. And it takes it off in a sort of even manner. If you try to wipe it away like this, it'll add a bunch of brush strokes or, marks in there that you may not want. All right, now what I think I'm going to do is, sort of for the sake of, taking this in another direction, is I'm going to mix some paint. I'm going to mix some grays. So that's one of the things that we're going to practice doing right off the bat is mixing paint. So you take a little black, move it over here with your palette knife. Hopefully you guys can see that. Okay. I'm going to pick up a little of this white that I just grabbed and mix it in. Okay, that's kind of a dark gray, and maybe I'll take it over here and make a little bit of a lighter gray. So now I got a pile of black, darker gray, and lighter gray. So I have 3 different tones. And I suppose I could even make a lighter gray over here if I wanted. Just get a little more white. I'm pretty sparing with my paint. I tend to take it out only as I need it, because I'd rather do that than have to try to figure out a way to save it at the end of the day. Though, I guess the disadvantage to that, though, sometimes you find yourself without enough paint and you have to keep taking it out of the tubes. So what I could do now, pull some of the excess out of here. Since I use this one mostly for white, this ought to go nicely into the grays without causing any issue. I might clean it just a hair. Let's take a little of the excess white out of it. Make sure you keep putting this cap back on. You don't want to get a bunch of fumes. And I'm going to start looking at my piles and trying to color match. Sorry, you can't see the cup over there, but I'm trying to color match what I see in my different pigment piles to areas that I see in here, different grays that I see on the cup itself. Okay. Hope you guys can see this. I keep looking at my camera trying to see if it's doing what I want it to do. Starting to pull too much off the canvas. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and like kind of leave this alone for just a second. And maybe the only other thing I'm going to do before I quit for now, because again, you got to realize some of this stuff you're going to want to dry a little bit and then go back in with a smaller detail brush perhaps to fine tune. I'm going to establish this shape just a little bit better. Blend that a tiny bit more. Then I'm going to go ahead and tonk out a little bit more of this stuff. Yeah, I can always make this shadow darker, but sometimes it's harder to make it light again. So I'm going to go ahead and take just a little bit extra out just to make sure that it's not too dark. Okay. I've decided, ho-ho, I got a lot of black on my palette, and it really would not hurt, not at all, to get more of dark up here in the background. I think sometimes, not always, that's not always the case, but I think for mine, for this particular painting, I think that black really is going to help sort of establish the difference between the background and the foreground. Bring that cup forward even more, make it seem more luminous without having to add a bunch more white onto it tomorrow or whenever I work on it again. Maybe I don't want it to be completely solid black, so I'm trying to like feather it out. Okay, you know what? I think that's going to be solid enough for now, and hopefully I'll be able to revisit this after it's dried a little bit, and I'm gonna try to take it a little further. I'm gonna try to, you know, maybe put in a little bit more detail. Ooh, this is risky. I'm gonna try it though. Sometimes you just want to use the paint that you have, right? It's there, might as well use it. Establish that inside edge. Cool. Good enough. Like I said, maybe I should just leave it alone now before it turns to mud. Let this dry. You know, it should be dry in a day or two. I'm going to say 2 days to be safe. Usually it's a 2-day process with oil paint. If you're an acrylic painter, you don't have to wait at all. I mean, honestly, this would be ready to work on again very quickly. So not a big deal. But oil painters, you do have to give it a little bit of a rest. Let it set for a day or two. Sorry, 2 days. And if you're using a lot of oil medium, maybe something else. But if I don't want to mess this paint up, and I want to let this paint dry, I'm going to let it sit 2 days, and then I can come back to it and I can manipulate it even more. I can darken some areas, I can put in some more highlights, I can bring in little brights, little shiny spots, any of that kind of stuff, and really fine tune, start fine tuning that information.